So last week, we had this workshop, the Central Bank Macro Modeling Workshop at the Central Bank of Chile. It was the 24th anniversary of a workshop that started in New Zealand after they'd published their forecasting and policy analysis system, showing the world effectively what their analytical framework was to implement inflation targeting. And as we have seen in subsequent work, that set the stage or provided the foundation for increases in transparency over time, which was followed by some very useful examples of how you develop monetary frameworks and make them transparent over time, including the Czech National Bank, which has been one of the best central banks in Eastern Europe, and the Central Bank of Chile, which has been regarded as one of the best central banks in Latin America. So New Zealand spread to other parts of the world, and these other parts of the world also developed frameworks, invested in developing frameworks and implementing these frameworks. And as a result, they also experienced very large increases in transparency. So one of the discussions that we had, both in terms of the development of the frameworks and the implementation, is the types of resources that are required, in particular, the human resources. So we need to have great macroeconomists, for example. And they also need to have a useful macro toolbox that's designed specifically to support these monetary policy regimes and so on. So I thought it would be fun to go back to this speech, which is now on our website for FPAS Mark IIs, so the update of the forecasting and policy analysis system. And so I put selected readings on it for anyone that's interested in this, developing a general understanding of what's going on in terms of developing these frameworks and so on. So Stan chooses a quote from Samuelson, where he said, "I'd rather have Bob Solow than an econometric model, but I'd rather have Bob Solow with an econometric model than without one." So implying that models aren't very useful unless you have great macroeconomists to use them. So obviously, not every central bank in the world can have a Bob Solow. So I want you to think of Bob Solow as something that we strive for. And in some cases, for example, given the breadth and depth of knowledge of someone like Bob Solow, it's probably better to think of central banks having several people that try to cover the same knowledge base that Bob Solow has and experiences and so on. So let's just have some fun here. When these regimes were first started, I don't think many people recognize this, but when central banks are thrown off of a pegged exchange rate regime, like they were in the late 1990s, because they've had no previous experience implementing a flexible exchange rate regime, we can assume that they don't have any Bob Gordons at all. Nor do they have a useful macro toolbox for thinking about monetary policy. And so if we thought of it in terms of this chart, I have on the vertical axis, I have the number of Bob Solows, okay, but I want you to remember that we want to think of Bob Solow as a composite character composed of a bunch of resources inside the central bank, including model developers, people that generate the model scenarios, people that do all the current analysis to think about where is the economy and what are the underlying forces. And of course, that last piece where we put it all together using a core projection model, as well as a suite of models to accompany it into some scenarios that ask, what do we need to do with our policy instruments to achieve our objectives? And of course, what if we don't do these things to our instruments? What types of policy errors could result in it? So again, thrown into a flexible exchange rate regime, usually inflation targeting, you start off, you've got no Bob Solo, and you've got no useful macro toolbox. So the very first thing that you do, obviously, is try to develop some people, and we can think of that as developing Bob Solo, or you might get some advice from somebody. You might try to bring a Bob Solo in to teach you how to create Bob Solos. And then, of course, once that happens, you then ask, well, as Dan Fisher said, I prefer Bob Solo rather than an econometric model, but I prefer Bob Solo with an econometric model. And so we can think of this as, once we have that Bob Solo, we can now think of building an econometric model and a production possibility frontier. Okay, so something that trades off how many resources the central bank puts into developing in Bob Solos versus investing in developing the models that go into the toolbox. Now, one might ask, why do you need so many Bob Solos? So, for example, why would you need 2 Bob Solos? And the answer to that is because this is all about trying to understand the implications of uncertainty. And so the more people that we have thinking about plausible scenarios, the more that policymakers might be successful at avoiding what Olivier Blanchard has referred to as dark corners. And I think this is a very important lesson that we've learned both from the global financial crisis and our current experiences with COVID. And so I hope you've enjoyed that. You'll find this stuff on our website at Better Policy Project. So next time, bye.